Hi, hope you are all doing well. This video is part of a series to show what can be done within the monorepo with Angular in the front end and nestjs in the back end. In the previous video that I uploaded, we started to create a DB and we use a VS Code extension Thunder client for that. So now we'll try to do the same thing by building our user interface with Angular. And if you haven't yet subscribed, please don't forget to do so. You will like the amazing content that I drop here. So without further ado, let's continue our journey with our ToDo application. So what I will first do is to go to the website of Angular Material. So there are some schematics that we will use. Let's first start by adding the Angular Material schematic. Well, I didn't install the Angular package ng globally, so I will need npx for that. Let's say yes, yes again. It will take few minutes for the packages to be installed. So in the meantime, we can continue to talk about some of the schematics that we'll also add. We use the navigation schematic so that very quickly we can have this toolbar and the menu on the side. So I find this schematic to be very handy. Another schematic that I also find very useful is the dashboard schematic. I'm not sure that I'm going to add it to this application, but it's very handy when you start building an application. But for now, I think that we'll only use the navigation schematic. I guess it is enough for what we are trying to do. Well, later on, if we think that we need other schematics, we can add them. All the packages are now installed. Now let's go and add our second schematic. We talked about the navigation schematic. So let's copy this command here. But before, let's cd into our front-end folder. Okay, yeah, I need to give a name to the component. So let me just call it navigation. Okay, there is an error. So we need to specify on which module the component is going to be imported. So let's add dash module app. So it will be imported in this app module here. So the navigation component is now generated. What we now try to do is to remove all these codes that was generated. This code was generated when we started our application. So now let's just call the navigation component that we just created. If you now navigate to the browser, so we can see that it is working. But the display is not exactly what we want. So I guess it's because of the styling that we had that was generated at the beginning of the application. Let's just remove it. And voila. So we now have the toolbar plus the side menu. And then all of that thanks to the schematic that we added at the beginning. So we also now try to add two components, a to-do list component and then we also use a to-do component. And we are going to use these two components to query our database. So now let's try to generate these two components. So I first need again to cd into the app folder. Then I will copy the path and paste it. And npx ng generate component. You can call it to-do list. So again, we have this error. So let's add the module app. So with this one, we now have our, our component that is generated. And this component will be the one that will display all the to-do items that we do have in our application. So this component will do a get request to get all the to-do items that we have in our backend. So now what we also try to do is to write the HTML page, and we can use the math card for it. So now let's head to the Angular material page and find the math card that we use. So we'll copy the snippet here. So we do have some errors because we haven't yet imported the math card module. So let's import it. So the math card is now imported. And now if you navigate to the page, it's still not shown because what we now try to do is we need to generate the routing module. We need to add that module, and we can generate it by using npx ng generate the module, and let's call it app routing. This command will generate this module in a new folder, but if we don't want to do that, we can use the dash flat, and then it will generate it in the same folder as our app module. And then again, we also use dash module app so that it can be imported directly within app module. So now the routing module is generated, and then it will be imported in the app module. So now if you go to our app routing module, so we need to create a route. Constant route is going to be an array. and the route is of type route. So we also now need to define our route. So we add the path to do, plural form, and we add the component, the to-do list component that we created. So let's also import the route. So we are going to import, to tell here that our to-do list component is to be rendered here by using the router outlet. And then the error that we had while we were writing the router outlet is because we need to export our router module here. Now let's start writing our to-do list HTML page. So there is a title to it, and then we use a to-do element. So for now, they are just some div that we use. And now if we navigate to our browser, so we can see that it is displayed. Now let's also add a to-do component. So again, we need to navigate to our app folder, and then we generate our component. A component is created, they are generated, and inside this component, let's create an interface to do, which has an ID and a name, but both type string. So you have an ID, type string, so a name, a type string, so it is complaining that we haven't used our to do, so we need to export it, and then we can use it in our to do list component. So in the to do list component, we now create an array of to do. So before we get the data from the backend, we can just hard code the values for now. Now that we do have a to-do list here, we can loop over it in the template and display it to the user. So I will use the math list that needs also to be imported in the app module. And also I try to add a button to display the to-do item. So after making all those small changes, now let's add some CSS classes just for styling it a little bit. So now if you now look at the page, our to-do list component is well rendered. So we also try to handle the click action when we try to click on this button. And then by clicking on it, we can render the to-do item in another page. And for now also, we only have a single information on the to-do item, which is its name. But I mean, this name is just a description of the to-do. So we can imagine that there are several ways that to interact with a to-do item, like editing it, deleting it, and so on. For some of those interactions, we can move them to the to-do item page. So far, our to-do list is hard-coded in our component. So what we now try to do also is to connect our front end with our back end. And then therefore we need to do some HTTP requests. So in the to-do list component, we'll call the app service, and this app service will make the necessary request for us to get the data that we need. If we now navigate to our to-do list page, all the elements are displayed. So there are some empty rows because I did push to the backend some to-dos that were empty before. But now also let's add an input where we can directly also add a to-do item directly to our backend. And so we also need an additional button where the user can click and push that to-do element to the backend. So for that we are making also a post request where we can send this to-do element to the backend. We are also we need also to import the math input module since we are using the input in our template. So in the meantime, also we try to handle the action on the display button so that it can redirect to a new page. So we are creating a new, we are calling the display to do method. So we haven't yet created it, so let's go also and create it in the component. And now let's inject the route and the activated route and use them to navigate to a specific to-do page. And this routing here is using the ID, but our backend doesn't send us the ID element. Our MongoDB does send us an underscore ID. So let's make some changes on the backend so that we can get an ID instead of an underscore ID. So we make a transformation on our schema using the transform function. Now back to our Angular route, we also need to add a new entry for the to-do component. And in our to-do component itself, we now need to call to query the database so that it can send us the detail regarding a specific to-do item using the ID that is in the route of the to-do item. So the backend doesn't have yet an API endpoint to return a to-do item, so we now need to add it on the backend side. So with all these changes, if we navigate now to the to-do list page, we can add an element. Well, but if nothing happens, because if we inspect, yeah, it's because we needed to refresh the page to see the element that we added. So we can see here at least that the post request to add the to-do is working, but we can just add a small change to the to-do list component to update the page after the new to-do has been created. So here we subscribe, and then when the subscription is called, then we can just call the get to-do list. So here we can now see that when we add a new to-do, it works perfectly. So here on this to-do item page, something you can do is just to display the to-do name, since it's the only information that we do have about the to-do item. So we are getting the to-do here. We subscribe to it, and then when we receive the data, we can just assign it to the to-do attribute that we do have. And then in the template, we can just display the name property of the to-do attribute. So if you navigate again to the page, well, we do have a small error here. Well, it seems that the URL is malformed. Well, you can see that the URL is malformed here. So you need to make a small change in our app service. So we are not passing the ID to the request. So now again, if we navigate to the page after making this small change, and we refresh the page, and voila, we are now able to make this the query and to get the data associated to that ToDo item. So we can see that we are now able to make the same queries as we were doing in the previous video using the Thunder Client extension. So there are a lot of things that we can still do for this application. So the styling for this ToDo component, or adding other queries like deleting a ToDo item. So we talk about it as we continue our journey with this application. So hope you like this video, and don't forget to subscribe as we are journeying together completing this application. So until the next video.